Hello, everyone. Erik Roth, Shamanic Astrologer here to bring you another update of astrology and the signs and the planets. And there's a really big ingress, which means essentially ingress is a planet moving into a new sign, but primarily associated with the outer planets that we're talking about here. One in particular, I did a recent video of Saturn moving into Pisces, which happened back on March 7th of 2023. And this one involves Pluto. And this has been, there's a lot of astrologers, a lot of people talking about this. And I won't be able to get everything that Pluto will be doing in this sign or all the different things that it's going to be a part of because it's a really, really long transit. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. So Pluto and Aquarius. This is a part of the Planets and Signs series, which Saturn and Pisces would definitely qualify as that. I'm going to be moving some of the other videos like upcoming Jupiter and Taurus, which happens in May, and in the years to come, Neptune and Aries, Uranus and Gemini. We'll be looking at that a lot more as we go on here. But with Pluto and Aquarius, which is, has been really symbolic for many decades of astrologers and others talking about how we're moving into, quote, the age of Aquarius, unquote. And this could be considered part of that dynamic that's happening, part of that movement into this next new age. And in fact, at the time of this recording, we're just a couple of years away from the end of the Kali Yuga, which is the Hindu version of the Dark Age. So 2025 is sort of the symbolic theoretical end of that, and we move into a next transition period that'll last centuries, according to that calendar. We're also another calendar with regarding the precession of the equinox. We're moving into a turning of a large age from one 26,000 year period to another. And that is something also that takes centuries to do. And so we're kind of in the thick of it, the thick of the middle of of each of these things where we're moving from one age to another age. There are other calendars, other symbols that help mark this age. But this one, certainly in particular, Pluto moving into Aquarius at this time, certainly helps to elucidate what's going on. So let's dive into what this means. But first, I'd like to share more about what we're going to highlight first, and then talk about what Pluto means in astrology, particularly shamanic astrology. So these are the main highlights of this particular video. First, we're going to talk about Pluto and shamanic astrology. We'll also talk about the sign of Aquarius and what this Pluto and Aquarius transit means, 2023 through 2044. And the history of Pluto and Aquarius, we'll be looking specifically at the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius during the end of the 18th century. And then what does this transit say about the future? Meaning that, okay, so the commentary, which is going to be kind of sprinkled in throughout this particular video. So stay tuned for that. And then there's towards the end of the video is what we're going to look at some significant highlights. One in particular that is catching my attention in the 2030s while Pluto is still in Aquarius. And there is another one in several years from now in the late 2020s, which involves Chiron and Saturn, which Chiron and Jupiter. We'll look at that. And the one that happens in the 2030s involves a T-square between Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. So really, really big stuff happening. And that would require like years to come, a different video just to focus all attention on that, because these are really big topics, and we certainly can't fit everything in just this one video. although others would try to, spend a couple of hours just talking about this. So let's talk about what Pluto means. And it's certainly at the time that it was discovered as the farthest from planet from the sun, and Earth is a symbolic gateway. Pluto is a symbolic gateway to the realm beyond and within our souls. It is one of the planets that represent the underworld, the place of surrender and transformation. So here's some of the major astrological qualities of Pluto. Transformation through facing fears. It can be a catalytic fire, cleansing and detoxification. It's a place where feelings really, really matter. So it's not a place where you can solve things with your intellect or mind or with your will. It's about surrender and feelings and allowing that to come into form and certainly in alignment with your soul. Experiencing the dark in self and others, a reflection of our own unintegrated shadow. It also promotes healing through chelation and cathartic processes. So that's really, again, transformation. To some degree, there's also alchemy that can take place in this, although that's much more associated with Chiron. And Pluto is where our greatest treasures are to be discovered. And I'm not talking about necessarily financial treasures, although it's possible. It's more like the soul's treasures. And we think of treasure, we think of things buried in the ground or locked in a hidden domain that we have to solve the puzzle or uncover in some way. And when you think of the ground and how dark it is, that there's no sunlight in that place. But it's also the place where all the constituent minerals and vitamins and other nutrients are buried, where plants and then animals can exist. So without that soil or the deep, dark domain of the oceans, for example, there wouldn't be that life. There wouldn't be those treasures. Pluto can also symbolize the dark night of the soul, particularly when we're experiencing a Pluto cycle or transit. Source of empowerment, but through powerlessness. So to get to empowerment with Pluto, it's experiencing powerlessness. So it's, again, these are other words that can be used that relate to, not exactly as the word surrender. The powerlessness means you don't, it's beyond your control. The shed happens and there's only so much that you can do to overcome that, except usually the best strategy would be to surrender to that and allow yourself to move in to that space of transformation, particularly, again, on a soul level. But it can happen. There certainly can be external things that can take place that catalyze, that activate that transformation. So this is Aquarius. So very different sign, especially when we're relating that to the sign, the planet of Pluto. So it's a sign of astrology that symbolizes the archetype of the innovator, the experimenter, idealist, the cosmic expander, and the revolutionary thinker. The sign represents the leading edge or avant-garde of humanity's thoughts and consciousness expansion. It is an archetype that is typically well ahead of its time in the world, seeding ideas that may not be fully birthed, let alone realized for many years, potentially even decades or centuries. Aquarius can, not just in the human being, but in, generations that follow. Aquarius can see and perceive as an eagle would above the earth, obtaining the larger or even cosmic perspective of community and civilization. The shadow of Aquarius is a dearth of empathy. So it's like it lacks it has kind of the bare minimum. I mean, all human beings, no matter what signs they are, they on a basic level, unless there's something disconnected inside their mind or brain, like on a medical level, we all generally have uh, empathy. Again, there certainly are exceptions out there, and we've certainly seen that in history. But on a general level, meaning that its decisions for Aquarius typically come from logic, intelligence, and the mind in general. This is why we think of like scientific experiments or technology or even consciousness expansion, and doing it at such a rate or at with such a desire that where empathy doesn't factor really into it. But strangely enough, that Aquarius does have this also a side of it as a humanitarianism streak, where it's this idealist, in that way, where it can factor in very, very heavily, like on a what we call on a healthy side of Aquarius, can really show up on that level. But the where they're really super cut off from the empathy, they can certainly lack at that and make decisions without considering the sort of the ramifications of how others would feel around that. But Aquarius can also, and certainly in its shadow, can be what we can call light polarized and deny that the shadow in humanity even exists. In fact, I met somebody a few years ago? I think it was before the pandemic, and this person had an Aquarius moon. And it was an interesting conversation because this person denied that there is such a thing as a shadow. I disagreed with him, but it really displayed like the true shadow, that there is no shadow of Aquarius. And so it's kind of this closed loop where it could be really hard to get out of that space and kind of denying even your own, to some degree, your own vulnerabilities in that regard. So it can block someone's growth when we're in denial of our own shadow or humanity's shadow, or even the shadow of just other individuals taken one at a time. All right, so let's take a look at when Pluto is moving into Aquarius, which March 23rd is the date. March 23rd, 2023 is that time, where at the time of this recording, on March 17th, it's only 6 days away from now. So Pluto's long trek through the sign of Aquarius, through the sign of Capricorn since 2008 will begin to end in 2023. Pluto ingresses into the sign of Aquarius March 2023, and it'll spend about just giving us a little glimpse of 2.5 months or so in the sign of Aquarius before retrograding back into Capricorn for the rest of 2023. In 2024, Pluto spends almost 10 months in, really, I check that, not quite 10 months. It's more like 7.5 months, because from January 2024 till September 1st, 2024. Actually, well, yeah, there's an extra added to the end of 2024 from November 19th. So yeah, we could say more closer to 9 months, I guess, with that. But that one period where it's like about a 7.5 month period from January 20th, 2024 to September 1st, added to November 19th, 2024 till the end of that year, it would be added to that. So it's closer to 9 months, really. But that will go on. So once it gets into at the end of 2024, November 19th, it will stay in Aquarius all the way until March 8th of 2043. And then it retrogrades, it starts to ingress into the sign of Pisces. And then it retrogrades back into Aquarius August 31st, 2043 through January 19th, 2044, and then finally going fully into the sign of Pisces after that. So that's sort of the timeline. And I've got some other information about that as we move on. There's different slides here. All right, so this is I've been focused on in recent videos, particularly with the recent Saturn and Pisces video, is to look at like what is the key factor here, really, like if we can encapsulate this in just a few words. And for Pluto and Aquarius, it would be facing our shadow. Now, you could say that about pretty much everything. We all have to do that. But for Aquarius, it's particularly important because of that reason I shared before, where one of its major shadows is that it denies that there is a shadow. And so for that reason alone, we could really connect into this going, okay, facing our shadow. And I've got some information about what all of that means, and you know, really dive into this, along with, you know, how we can utilize Pluto and Aquarius too. So when was Pluto and Aquarius last time? Well, this was between 1777 and 1798, so the end of the 18th century. And for those that have seen my video, the Pluto return in the US, and any writings or other snippets of information that I talk about this, Pluto was in Capricorn at the time that the US declared its independence, essentially the birth of the country of the United States. So this was just a year later that Pluto moved into the sign of Aquarius. So they got a glimpse of that back then for about a month, almost a 2-month period between April 4th, 77 to May 27th, 1777. And then they got a longer, certainly a longer period from January 27, 1778 through August 20, 1778. But then, like the other thing, Pluto's dancing back and forth. And so when it finally moved into Aquarius for the full length of it was from December 1st, 1778 through April 11th, 1797. And that continued back and forth a little bit after that until finally in December, the end of December of 1798, it fully moved into the sign of Pisces after that. So, you know, this, we can say 20 years to 22 years for Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. And as it's moving further into this part of the zodiac, it's going to spend a lot of time in these signs. So or I think it's going to be around 25-ish years when as it spends in Pisces. It was roughly about 16-ish years that it spent in the sign of Capricorn, and Sagittarius was about 13 years or so, and Scorpio was only roughly about a dozen years. So it's increasing. Pluto is slowing down in its orbit, so it's spending a lot of time in these signs. And so, you know, our individual personal Pluto cycles are going to get longer over time, but they're going to happen less frequently. So there's a trade-off there. All right. So of course, you know, what was happening during the last part of the 18th century? Well, we had, of course, the Revolutionary War here in the United States, which co-created the foundation of this country. We also had, you know, Born in War against the British, and even the French and the Spanish were involved. The Spanish were fighting the British around this time as well. So there were a lot of wars and ideals that were passed. In fact, in France, this was also during the time of the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror that took place, where the revolution essentially got out of hand, where you know, idealisms took on a much more violent way, and you know, many thousands died, and perhaps many of them certainly unnecessarily, where other measures could have been done. So it all depends on whose hands the powers that be fall into. The French Revolution certainly taught a lot there. So let's take a look at some themes from that after I just started to talk about this a little bit here. So here are the bullet points from the previous incarnation of Pluto and Aquarius. experiments and ideals arising from the deepest of the shadows and dark side of idealisms. Early stages of energy technologies began to take hold with steam and coal. So that was something interesting to learn about during that time. We were at the very beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. Now, there's a lot of historians that would say, oh, this began a little earlier, prior to the American Revolution, or began a little bit later, all dependent on one's perspective and the accomplishments of certain inventors and the use of energy itself. But energy and Pluto tend to go hand in hand. There's a really powerful relationship between Pluto and energy. And so I'll be talking about that off and on throughout this video. The underlying seats of power coming into light. And that's certainly with the American Revolution and the French Revolution are prime examples of that showing up in a big way. Revolutionary and counter-revolutionary powers. So both the idealisms coming into light, and then the forces that want to stop that, and like as a reflex back into what it once was, or to some other kind of ideal that can be looked at as a counter-revolutionary. Energy sources utilized by humanity created an unstoppable transformation of civilization. This includes powerful societal shifts through the Industrial Revolution and the rise of new powers. So this is, experiments in electricity during this time. We talked about steam power. Obviously, things didn't, cities and other municipalities didn't electrify until much later in the 19th century. But this was sort of the early going of those experimentations and other forces at work. And it changed society, factories, industrialism. It changed the fabric of societies throughout. So there was a change of power that was happening across Europe and in the colonial North America, and down into where the Spanish had invaded Mexico and Central America, down into South America as well, and even parts of Africa and Asia. So it spread across the globe, and really no pun intended, picked up steam during this time, and especially as we got after this time of Pluto and Aquarius, it really picked up a lot of steam after that. Of course, other planets in their other signs were showing up and doing their own thing. So it wasn't just only Pluto, but it's Pluto you can point to, certainly with energy. And even today, with our experiments that haven't really made much headway, but we're starting to get kind of an inkling of this new power change, especially as we get away from the decades to come. Mostly, I don't think fossil fuels will ever permanently go away, but I do believe that most of the energy generated on this planet will eventually move away from fossil fuels and into more renewable sources such as solar and wind and ocean power, along with these really new energies that have been tried for decades. They've been experimenting on actual fusion power, which is different from nuclear power and what is called fission power. Fusion power doesn't leave any waste products, and so they've made headway. And I have this feeling, based on certain trends, that it's going to become more commonplace by the end of this time of Pluto and Aquarius, along with these other energy sources, and perhaps even new experiments that come online, and even like power from space. So these are just something to look for as things develop. So additionally, we can look at this. So Pluto, in its sign of death and rebirth, which is what this is, what Pluto is about, and our relationship to innovation, technology, relationship to consciousness, and its desire to expand. Pluto Aquarius can lead to a deeper level catharsis of spiritual desire of the mind to understand the nature of source. Aquarius is the sign of consciousness's evolution and expansion. The sign connects us to the leading edge of thought and future landscapes in humanity. Aquarius involves itself in change for the greater benefit of humanity, but this depends upon the person or community's perspective of what really is of greater benefit to humanity. So, again, perspective, like, well, what is really going to be beneficial? Obviously, on a core level, to have a healthy relationship with other human beings and planet Earth at the same time. So like from, that's kind of essentially a starting place. And then going from there is a matter of perspective. And it could even be ideals could even take away from that. An unhealthy version would be going into the consciousness and the mind and the intellect and experimentation and completely ignoring our natural habitat, our livability, and going more into technology and say artificial intelligence as another thing that could come out of this. So it could be, again, there's talks about this sort of the this like unity consciousness, this sense of the greater one. It's like there's a term that is used for this, and I'm suddenly forgetting that, but it has to do with the sort of emergence of humanity with technology, but also at the same time, it could be humanity with the source, with the oneness of like the universal energy, rather than utilizing it through artificial means. So these are two trains of thought, two tracks that are going on even today. And there's going to be greater, to me, an intent for greater conflict in this, but it's all in how we use all of that stuff. So Aquarius has a revolutionary mind, but is not about leading the charge of rebellion, like taking the action such as Aries would do. This comes more from the mind and cosmic thoughts. Aquarius desires to innovate, invent, and spread its wings into the mind of the divine or cosmos. Aquarius usually gets its knowledge from elsewhere, and at times is driven to its mind touching the divine energy. Aquarius is not about one's feelings or empathy. The archetype of Aquarius can theorize what universal love is about it and enact it, but feelings are akin to a different universe. So it's more of an experiment for Aquarius and to test upon, within that experience. So like all signs, I mean, we all have emotions, we all have feelings, but it's Aquarius treats that very, very differently, has a lot more energy expended into the intellect, into the mind, rather than putting that as a priority, much more so than the heart. Again, it doesn't mean it doesn't have a heart. I just want to be clear about that. All signs do, but some have greater emphasis on certain parts, like Cancer and Pisces puts enormous emphasis in the heart. And so again, this is why we have a 12 signs of the zodiac. They kind of complete the circle. And each human being, has mixes of signs. So we have astrological houses too that help us understand what's going on, the context of where these signs are being placed. So I want to be clear that Aquarius isn't like devoid of any, at least at its essence, is not devoid of any emotion or feeling. It just prioritizes other things over that. Okay, so here is the chart for March 23rd, 2023. And we can see at that time when it ingresses into Aquarius, the moon is actually 6 hours later, moves into a square with Pluto at that time. So at the time, the moon is at 2621 Aries. In fact, there's this, I'll be writing this in my Facebook posts, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and to some degree my newsletter, about this continuing Aries stellium that is strongly still strongly in force at the time of this recording here on the 17th of March, 2023. But this is Pluto's first ingress into any sign since 2008, and the first time in Aquarius since at the end of the 18th century. So Pluto will only be in the sign for 2.5 months, as I shared before. And this will give us a little bit of a preview of upcoming events. So a lot of what I was sharing, I think we'll just kind of get a taste, a whiff of things that are going to be much more in our humanities theater beginning in 2024 and beyond. All right, so where is Pluto in the sky? Well, this is where it is, right between two constellations, the Archer and the Goatfish. And even the Water Bear is not far off from here. Now, signs are seasonal, so they're connected to their seasons, what we can call more a tropical zodiac. I've also heard Robert Powell use, who wrote the book A History of Zodiac, a temporal zodiac, meaning signs in time, which I really like that. I've heard others use this as a directional zodiac. I don't use that, but for some that could be helpful. In fact, Gemini Brett talks about that in his work. But we can't see Pluto in the sky, but we can know the direction and the location of it just based on software and telescopes. So we can see where that is. It's at the dividing line there between Capricorn and Aquarius. The constellations themselves are their own energy field. I mean, symbolically representing other things, and that would be a much longer video. I've done a whole online course with Kaylin Castell about the zodiacal constellations at mystaralchemy.com, so you can look that up if you want to know more about that. But just for anyone that wanting to kind of connect with Pluto and sort of have more of a direct relationship with it, one of the ways to do that is experientially and connecting outside in the sky and kind of facing the general direction if you want to get specific, and doing ceremony or doing an invocation. This is one way to work with Pluto in that sense. Now, in this cycle, there are two periods of time which really highlight Pluto's transiting through the sign, and particularly the one that I've highlighted in yellow between 2035 and 2036, with forming a major T-square. That means we've got two planets that are opposite, Saturn and Pluto, and then Jupiter, which squares both Saturn and Pluto. Saturn in Leo, and Jupiter in Taurus, and Pluto in Aquarius. And Jupiter squares Pluto 3 times, and Saturn opposes Pluto 3 times. But between 2028 and the beginning of 2030, we have Saturn and Chiron playing a huge role in a relationship with Pluto. And so there's a Saturn-Chiron conjunction series that happens during that time as well, which would be essentially a video all on its own. But they happen in the sign of Taurus. And Pluto in Aquarius is squaring all of that. So that, and they have, let's see, Saturn has 3 squares. Jupiter's in there with 1 square while it's in Scorpio. But Chiron has 5 squares with Pluto during this time. So it's pretty remarkable what's going on there. And then, there's no Neptune, Uranus, or Eris relationships in hard aspects, that is, with Pluto during this time. Eris had a big relationship with it, and a few years ago, 2021, 2020, when it was squaring Pluto, and ended up squaring, of course, Saturn as well at that time. So that was also helping form humanity, which would be, again, that's another part of this puzzle that is being expressed in humanity right here. Okay, so we have here's a capture of one of the oppositions. I think this is the first. October 17th would be October 17th, 2035 is the first opposition that Saturn has with Pluto. And here's the square to Jupiter. Not quite exact with Jupiter on this at this time, but each of these is going to be pretty close, a pretty tight T-square going on here, and worth exploring down the road. Again, this is still 12 plus years away. So we'll see what happens in the next 12 years. In fact, Jupiter will be moving into Taurus in 2023. So this kind of follows along that line of the 12-year journey that Jupiter has through the zodiac. This is really the next big phase between Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. Now, of course, I mentioned there's a Saturn-Pluto square taking place, that one with Chiron towards at the end of this decade, 2028, and 2029. But this one in 2035 and 36 is going to be really, really big. So there's 3 squares between Jupiter and Saturn, 3 squares between Jupiter and Pluto, and 3 oppositions between Saturn and Pluto, all within this roughly year period of time. Okay, so any thoughts, anything else I want to share about this? Well, this is in 2020 and 2021, we saw this systemic breakdown and initiation of a transformation in many areas of humanity upon the onset of the pandemic and much more. That during that time, Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter were in a loose conjunction, and in different times, and particularly in March 2020, and in even in January, when there was the first January 2020, when there was the first the only exact Saturn Pluto conjunction, but then also in November of 2020, where they all got pretty close together within about 4-ish degrees, and Eris was squaring that during the U.S. election. So there was a lot that went down in 2020 that it still is unraveling. Like this is not something that is, 2020 is in the past, we don't have to worry about it. Well, no, there's still a lot that's unfolding with this. So this seeded a multi-decade period from 2020, 2021 until the next time Saturn and Pluto conjunct in 2053. Now, Jupiter won't have a hard aspect at that time with Saturn and Pluto, though it's only about 1 sign ahead. But I do feel like that's like a completion of this next round. There are other patterns, the Jupiter-Saturn pattern, which will culminate again in 2040, as it did at the end of 2020. So, something to look out for. And then, of course, then we move to the 2035-36 T-square, and that will likely be the fruition of, at least the first stage of the fruition of what was seeded in 2020 to 2021. So we have a lot of things that are happening with these 3 planets going into the future, and how remarkable it is. Like Saturn, Uranus, and Jupiter will not get together again until the 2700s, like in conjunction. And for those that want to learn more about that, to watch my 2020 video, No Easy Way Through, I would certainly encourage you to do that, to learn more about that. And I recorded that back in 2017. So that one was, and then of course I recorded other videos since then that talk more about the alignments and kind of got into the details of that. Well, that's all I have for you on this video. More to come with Pluto and Aquarius in the future. And you can find me at inspiralnexus.com. My email, inspiralnexus@gmail.com, and on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. And you can also find me at mystaralchemy.com, where I do courses with Kaylin Castell. And there is going to be more projects ahead. So be on the lookout for that, and with more announcements in the upcoming months. And I'm going to be doing some travels to different fairs, including in state of Washington and second weekend of June, in the Seattle area, and also Aspen, Colorado, or the class will be held in Carbondale, Colorado. I'll be doing co-creating with a class with Sheridan Semple up there in the Rockies, and of course there's other projects ahead, so I'll be on the lookout for that, including the Oregon coast. So I look forward to doing this more, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like this if you do, and share it if you feel like others may benefit from this. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Take care, everyone.